I was 12 when the boy from the end of our street went missing, but I remember that summer with the clarity of a wound. The neighborhood on the south side of Chicago wasn't the kind of place people remembered unless they had grown up there or had a reason to forget it. Rows of weary houses, peeling fences, driveways patched with mismatched gravel. A quiet place, but the kind of quiet that came from resignation, not peace. You learned early to mind your business. Most families were religious in the way poor families often were, faith as the only thing they could afford. I remember the kid because he always sat alone on the curb in front of his house, tapping a stick against the concrete while he waited for one of his parents to return from work. His name was Daniel, and he was 9. His father worked nights at a packaging plant. His mother walked the neighborhood as a home care aide. When she got called for an overnight shift, Daniel stayed up late, the windows glowing behind him like he lived in a fish tank. The summer heat was brutal that year, the type that turned the air into syrup. Kids stayed outside until their shirts stuck to them. I biked up and down the block with some older boys, doing nothing at all, thankful just to be out of the house. Daniel watched us sometimes, but he was younger, quieter, the kind of kid who was careful with the world because he expected the world to break something if he wasn't. Then, in mid-July, 2 kids from a block over disappeared on the same day. I didn't know them, but the neighborhood felt it immediately. Their bikes were found in the alley behind the laundromat, one leaning, one flat on its side. No witnesses, no noise, no explanation. The adults said words like gang activity, trafficking, custody disputes. They didn't believe any of it. Nobody wanted to say what was really sitting behind their ribs. That children don't just evaporate. Not here, not in broad daylight. A few days later, I first noticed the truck. It was an old beige pickup with peeling paint and a bed full of junk covered by a tarp. No plates, no stickers. No reason to be on our street. It sat under the crooked elm across from Daniel's house. I don't remember hearing it arrive. I just saw it one day and assumed it belonged to one of the relatives visiting next door. People always had cousins dropping by, but the engine never ran. Nobody got in or out. It just sat there like a shed dropped in the wrong place. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the row of houses, I passed close to it on my bike. The air near the truck felt oddly cooler, as if the vehicle swallowed heat. I remember glancing at the side mirror. It was angled down, reflecting only the cracked street. The next morning, Daniel walked by it. I watched from across the street as he headed toward the corner store. The same routine he followed on mornings when his mother was called for work early. He had a couple of dollars folded in his hand, and he kicked small stones as he went. He walked past the truck without looking. On his way back, I saw him again. His bag of candy was clutched tight, and he moved a little faster, the way kids do when they feel watched. Later that afternoon, when the sun hung heavy and still, I saw the truck's passenger door crack open just an inch, enough to see the darkness inside. I remember thinking it was odd someone left it ajar. I remember convincing myself it wasn't my problem. That evening, Daniel didn't come home. I remember the scream, sharp at first, then collapsing into itself. His mother ran into the street, calling his name, spinning in circles like she expected him to appear if she turned fast enough. The whole block poured out onto porches, onto lawns. The police arrived, lights off, urgency thickening the air. I stayed behind the fence, watching, heart thudding, but not for reasons I could admit. I thought about the truck, about that door. I said nothing, not because I wanted to hide anything, but because I didn't understand what I'd seen, and because something in me whispered that speaking it aloud would make it real. By morning, Daniel was still gone, so was the truck, and our neighborhood was no longer the same. The search began before sunrise. Police officers knocked on every door, including ours. My mother kept answering for me, as if shielding me from responsibility I didn't yet know how to carry. "Did your boy see anything?" "No, he was inside." "Were you outside at all yesterday?" "No." She didn't ask me to confirm it. She didn't need to. The answer was the safest one. Some adults walked the streets with flashlights even in daylight, bending to peer into storm drains. under abandoned porches, behind dumpsters. Volunteers taped up missing posters with Daniel's picture. Small face, solemn eyes, brown hair trimmed short. I avoided looking at them too long. Rumors moved faster than the cops. 2 kids missing from Maple Street earlier that week. Another boy, rumored to have been grabbed in the next neighborhood. Someone swore they heard crying near the railroad yard at night. Someone else claimed they saw a strange group walking along the levee. But the most persistent rumor came from the older residents, the ones who had lived there since the 70s. They said this wasn't the first time children disappeared like this, that it happened once every decade, that the police never solved those either. They whispered about a group, never named outright, only referred to as them, who took exactly 13 children every 10 years. They called it the Circle, or sometimes the Count. Adults dismissed it in public, but the way they avoided eye contact told a different story. We were a religious neighborhood. Church was central to most families' lives. Faith brought comfort, but it also brought superstition. And some superstitions were seeds planted in real soil. 2 days after Daniel vanished, officers expanded their search. They found a footprint near the drainage ditch, small, likely a child's. Next to it, a larger one, but distorted, like someone had wrapped cloth around their feet or worn a handmade shoe. That's when they brought in more detectives. That same night, I spotted something from my bedroom window. Down the street, at the far end, I saw headlights, dim, unmoving. A shape stood in front of them, small, motionless. When I blinked, both the shape and the lights were gone. I didn't sleep after that. The house felt too quiet, too expectant. Every settling noise turned into a threat. Every shadow lengthened into something that might reach for me. But I didn't tell my parents what I'd seen. I didn't tell anyone. Silence felt safer. 3 more children disappeared that week, 8 in total, and our block felt like a hunted thing holding its breath. The detectives eventually found a trail. It led behind the old distribution warehouse at the edge of the neighborhood, where weeds grew waist-high and concrete slumped under its own weight. I followed the officers from a distance, keeping behind the fence. Kids weren't supposed to be there, but every kid eventually went to see where the cops gathered. They found scraps first, faded fabric, a torn shoelace, the broken clip of a hair barrette, all weather-worn but recent. The officers bagged everything carefully. Further in, they found symbols carved into a rotted pallet board, circles, intersecting lines, crude shapes like masks. The detectives tried to treat it like gang tags, but it didn't fit. This wasn't coded territory marking. It was ritualistic, repeated, practiced. Near the tree line, the soil looked disturbed. Someone had swept it flat with deliberate strokes, too neat for a child, too purposeful for random vagrants. One officer came out pale and refused to go back in. After that, the police started consulting old case files. Unsolved missing child reports from the late 70s and 80s, 13 each decade. Every time I overheard my parents whispering at night, thinking I was asleep. My mother wanted to send me to stay with relatives. My father said moving wouldn't matter. He said something I still remember. They don't take by chance, they take by pattern. That line stayed with me because it sounded like he believed the cult existed, like he'd always believed it. Later that week, I walked to the store for milk. On the way back, passing the alley behind the church, I felt watched, not by an adult. The sensation was different, sharp, focused, cold. I turned around. Nothing. Then I noticed a small mark drawn on the sidewalk, a circle. Inside it, a vertical line. I stared at it, heart pounding. Kids drew chalk shapes everywhere, but this matched the symbols found by the officers. That night I told myself not to think about it, not to connect anything, not to imagine that Daniel had walked the same path the morning he vanished. The next morning, 2 more kids were gone, 10 total. Almost there, almost at 13. The breakthrough came from an old man named Ruiz, who lived alone near the industrial zone. He'd been a police officer 3 decades earlier. When detectives knocked on his door, he hesitated before letting them in. He told them he had seen something like this before, and that back then the police had found a place, a kind of underground room where children had been kept shortly before disappearing for good, but the department shut the case quietly, labeling it a runaway situation. He drew them a rough map, and the next day they found it. A hidden entrance behind a thicket, leading to a sunken concrete room, half collapsed but still intact. The smell inside was soil, mold, and something older. On the walls, symbols like those from the pallet board, faded drawings in what looked like charcoal, a string of small bones tied in a loop. The detectives cleared the area, and for the first time, the city acknowledged the possibility of ritualistic activity. But it was already too late. 3 children disappeared in 48 hours. That made 13. Our neighborhood turned into a checkpoint overnight. Police taped the alleys, blocked the warehouses, patrolled in pairs. Helicopters hummed overhead. My parents kept me inside, but I watched through cracks in the curtains. I saw detectives arguing with each other. I saw neighbors crying. I saw a priest walking down the street holding a Bible pressed to his chest like a shield. Something was building. You could feel it beneath the skin of the city. A tension like the moments before a storm breaks. And then, just as suddenly, the search stopped. Officers gathered at the edge of the woods behind the distribution center. Cars blocked off the nearest roads. Something had been found. People whispered. They found the place. They found the circle. They found the children. But nobody spoke of finding anyone else. No footprints leading away. No masks. No cloaks. No torches. Only the aftermath. And silence. The truth came out in fragments. Not officially, not through statements, but through neighbors who knew someone on the force, who had heard something they weren't supposed to. I piece it together now, the same way we all did then. Half fact, half rumor, half horror, too solid to dismiss. Deep in the woods, in a clearing surrounded by old concrete foundations and rusted pipes, officers found an entrance hidden beneath a heavy, wooden board. Beneath it was a stairwell leading to a circular room. Old, reinforced with stone, older than anything the neighborhood remembered. Inside, laid out with deliberate precision, were 13 children, all missing, all arranged in a ring, all wearing simple white shirts, like they'd been dressed. There were no signs of struggle, but the worst part, the part whispered for years afterward, was that every single child looked as though someone had washed them, brushed their hair, and placed them gently where they lay. There was no blood, no weapons, no sign of who had been there with them. The cult left nothing behind. Not footprints, not clothing fibers, not fingerprints. It was as if they had dissolved into the darkness between one breath and the next. The city buried the case under procedural language. Suspected group activity, unknown perpetrators, case ongoing. But everyone in the neighborhood knew what it was. The count had been completed. The circle had closed. Life slowly resumed in the months that followed. But nothing was the same. Parents became stricter. Kids stopped playing outside. Porch lights stayed on year-round. Churches filled with people who prayed not for salvation, but for protection. I still think about Daniel. I still think about the truck. I still think about the shape I saw standing in headlights that weren't there. Most of all, I think about the stories the old residents told. Every 10 years. Every 10. 13. I was 12 then, I'm 32 now. 10 years passed. Another 10 are passing now. And 2 cities over, last month, I saw something on the news. 3 children missing. No leads. No witnesses. A strange symbol found behind a recycling plant. A circle with a line inside it. Just like the one I saw chalked on the sidewalk at 12 years old. I turned off the TV, and for the first time in 20 years, I locked every window in my house.